Marcus Reed had everything money could buy. A $40 million penthouse overlooking Central Park.
Look, Daddy, over
a
there!
private jet
Yes, I see.
waiting
Let's
at
go check it
Teterboro.
out.
It's
A
so
company
pretty!
worth $800 million.
You can't just ignore this.
And he was eating dinner
I'm not
alone
ignoring
again,
it. I'm handling it.
staring at his
Handling it.
daughter's
This
empty
affects us
chair
all.
across the mahogany table that seated 12. Across the city, in a fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, Dr. Claire Parker was eating instant ramen for the third night in a row. But she was smiling, because she'd just saved a homeless veteran's dog with her last $200, and the animal was going to live. The morning sun hadn't yet broken over Manhattan's steel and glass when Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, coffee going cold in his hand. 8-year-old Emma sat at the breakfast bar with Mrs. Helen Martinez, the nanny who'd raised her since she was 3, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate without eating. Marcus had already reviewed 3 contracts, answered 14 emails, and mentally rehearsed his talking points for the Chicago investor meeting scheduled for Thursday. Emma's voice cut through his concentration like a knife through silk. "Daddy, can you come to my school play Thursday?" Marcus's thumb hovered over his phone screen, calendar already open, the conflict glaring red. Chicago. 7 figures riding on his personal attendance. The investors had been explicit. "I have the Chicago investor meeting, sweetheart." Emma's face didn't fall so much as close, like a door swinging shut on a room that had been briefly, foolishly open. She'd heard variations of this answer for 5 years, since her mother died, since Marcus buried his grief in mergers and acquisitions and 16-hour workdays that left no space for the small human needs of an 8-year-old girl who barely remembered what her mother's voice sounded like. Mrs. Martinez shot him a look over Emma's bowed head. 40 years of raising other people's children concentrated into one silent rebuke. Marcus pretended not to see it. He had 2,000 employees depending on him, supply chains spanning 3 continents, shareholders who measured his worth in quarterly earnings. What was one school play against all that weight? He kissed Emma's forehead, grabbed his briefcase, and left for the office before the guilt could take root. Across the East River, Claire's alarm didn't go off because her phone had died overnight, the charging cable finally giving up after 3 years of desperate service. She woke to pale November light filtering through the single window of her studio apartment, realized she was already late, and launched herself out of bed with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been late to everything for the past decade. Her car, a 12-year-old Honda Civic held together by optimism and duct tape, refused to start. Again. The mechanic's estimate from last month sat on her counter, unpaid. $800 she didn't have. She grabbed her bike from the narrow hallway, checked that her veterinary bag was still strapped to the rack, and pedaled into the cold morning air. The student loan notice on her kitchen table announced that $1,847 was due in 9 days. Her bank account held $400 and change. The math didn't work, hadn't worked in years, but Claire had long ago accepted that her life existed in the space between impossible and necessary. Her phone buzzed in her pocket as she waited at a red light, breath coming out in white clouds. "Dr. Parker?" The voice belonged to Maria, one of the volunteers at Pause and Hope Free Clinic. "We have an emergency. Hit by car, looks bad. Owner can't pay, but I'll be there in 20 minutes. Claire didn't wait for the light. She cut across traffic, ignoring the honking horns and shouted obscenities, because somewhere in her neighborhood a dog was dying, and she was the only person who'd try to save it for free. The clinic occupied the ground floor of a building that should have been condemned a decade ago. Broken sign hanging at an angle, donated equipment older than Claire, walls that needed paint and heat that barely worked, and a waiting room full of people who loved their animals fiercely but couldn't afford the minimum payment at a regular veterinary hospital. Claire had opened this place with her mother's life insurance money and her own student loans, and she'd kept it running on willpower and ramen and the kind of stubborn hope that refused to acknowledge reality. She saved the dog. Pit bull mix, 3 years old, internal bleeding that required surgery she performed with instruments she'd bought second-hand and sterilized herself. The owner cried when Claire told him the dog would live. He tried to give her $40 in crumpled bills. She told him to keep it, buy the dog good food, come back for follow-up in a week. Maria waited until the owner left before speaking. "We can't keep doing this. The rent is due Friday. We're short $1,200. We'll figure it out." "With what money, Claire? You haven't paid yourself in 3 months. Claire stripped off her surgical gloves, washed her hands in the ancient sink, and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of despair before locking it away where it couldn't touch her work. "We'll figure it out," she repeated, because the alternative was unthinkable. Saturday arrived cold and bright. First snow of November dusting Central Park's frozen ground. Marcus had promised Emma he'd take her to the park, a rare window of unscheduled time he'd carved from his relentless calendar, like a man rationing water in a desert. Emma bundled herself in her pink coat, the one her mother had bought her, now too small but still her favorite, and bounced with an excitement Marcus hadn't seen in months. They walked through the park hand in hand, Emma chattering about school and friends and a science project involving volcanoes. Marcus listened with half his attention, the other half running through Monday's presentation, Wednesday's board meeting, Thursday's Chicago trip that would keep him away for 3 days. His phone buzzed 16 times. He ignored it. This was Emma's time. She pulled free from his grip and ran ahead toward the pond, delighted by the thin crust of ice forming at the edges. "Daddy, look! It's freezing!" Marcus followed at a slower pace, checking his watch. 2 hours. He could give her 2 hours before he needed to review the Henderson contract. The pond came into view, Emma standing at the edge, pointing at something in the water. A dog. Golden retriever, thrashing in the center where the ice had given way. The animal's head kept disappearing under the black water, surfacing again with desperate yelps that cut through the afternoon quiet. A crowd had gathered, 15 or 20 people filming on their phones, watching the dog drown in real time for content they'd scroll past tomorrow. Marcus's executive brain cataloged the situation in seconds. Ice too thin to support adult weight, water temperature near freezing, dog maybe 90 seconds from drowning. Someone should call animal control. Someone should do something. Emma turned to him with eyes that expected the world to make sense, expected adults to fix problems, expected her father to be the kind of man who acted instead of calculated risk-reward ratios. "Daddy, we have to help!" Before Marcus could respond, a woman appeared on a bicycle, moving fast. She dismounted in a single fluid motion, took in the scene, and stripped off her coat without hesitation. No phone call to authorities. No weighing of consequences. Just immediate, certain action. Claire Parker in faded jeans and a clinic sweatshirt, running toward the pond like it was her job to save every dying thing in New York City. She waded in up to her knees, then her waist. The ice cracked. She went under. Marcus saw Emma's face, terror replacing wonder, and something in him broke through 5 years of careful emotional distance. He ran. $5,000 suit, Italian leather shoes, phone and wallet still in his pockets. None of it mattered. The water hit him like a fist made of ice and darkness. He couldn't see Claire, couldn't see the dog, could only push forward through the shock until his hands found fabric, skin, the solid weight of another human being going under. He grabbed her coat, her arm, pulled her up and toward shore. She was clutching the dog with both hands, refusing to let go, even as her lips turned blue and her whole body shook. Marcus got his feet under him, found the bottom, dragged them both toward shallow water. His lungs burned. His fingers had gone numb. The crowd finally moved, hands reaching to pull them out. Someone wrapped the dog in a jacket. Someone else was calling 911. Emma threw her pink coat over the dog's shivering body, 8 years old and understanding in her bones what these adults with their phones had failed to grasp. When something is dying, you don't film it. You save it. Marcus collapsed on the bank beside Claire, both of them soaked and gasping. Paramedics materialized, wrapping them in silver thermal blankets, asking questions about their health and whether they'd hit their heads. Claire waved them off, attention fixed on the dog, checking pulse and breathing with professional efficiency despite her chattering teeth. "I can't afford the ambulance ride," her first words to him, delivered flat and factual, like she'd done this math before. Marcus stared at her, unable to process the statement. He'd just jumped into a frozen pond in November, and she was worried about ambulance fees. "It's your health. Money doesn't matter," she laughed, bitter and exhausted. "Easy for you to say in that suit. That's a month of my rent you just ruined." The words landed like a slap. Marcus looked down at his destroyed Armani, at the woman shivering beside him who'd just risked her life for a stranger's dog and was now doing mental accounting instead of accepting medical care. Something shifted in his chest, a tectonic plate of understanding moving after years of stillness. Emma appeared at his elbow, eyes wide and bright. "Daddy, can we help her? Please?" Marcus opened his mouth to agree, to offer money for the ambulance, for her coat, for whatever she needed. Claire cut him off. "I don't need charity. I need to get this dog to my clinic." She stood on unsteady legs, the thermal blanket falling away. One of the paramedics tried to guide her toward the ambulance. She shook her head. "I'm fine. I'm a veterinarian. I know when I need medical attention." Marcus stood too, water streaming from his clothes, phone dead in his pocket, presentation notes probably illegible mush. None of it felt important anymore. "At least let me drive you. You can't bike in wet clothes." "I don't even know you." "Marcus Reed. This is my daughter, Emma." He extended his hand, formal and absurd given the circumstances. Claire looked at it for a long moment before shaking, her grip firm despite the cold. "Claire Parker. And the dog needs to move now, not after we finish introductions." Marcus's Mercedes SUV was parked 3 blocks away. He carried the dog wrapped in Emma's coat while Claire walked beside him, arms wrapped around herself, leaving wet footprints on the frozen sidewalk. Emma held Claire's hand without asking permission. 8 years old and possessing the kind of emotional intelligence her father had traded away for quarterly earnings. The clinic was in a neighborhood Marcus had never visited, buildings leaning against each other like exhausted workers, graffiti marking territory, and the unmistakable edge of poverty that his Manhattan bubble insulated him from. Claire directed him to a storefront with a hand-painted sign, "Pause and Hope, Free Clinic." The O in Hope had faded to nothing. Inside smelled like antiseptic and wet dog, and something Marcus couldn't identify. Dedication, maybe? Or the particular scent of choosing purpose over profit. The equipment looked older than his company. Volunteers in mismatched scrubs moved with practiced efficiency. Claire took the dog from his arms and disappeared into a back room without another word. Mrs. Martinez arrived in her own car 10 minutes later, alerted by Marcus's text, bringing dry clothes and maternal disapproval in equal measure. "Mr. Reed, perhaps we should go." Emma planted herself on a plastic chair that had seen better decades. No, we stay until the dog is okay. Marcus looked at his daughter, pink coat gone, hair drying in wild tangles, expression set with a determination that reminded him painfully of Sarah before the cancer, before the chemo, before the hospice room he'd barely visited because he'd been in Los Angeles closing a deal that didn't matter. He sat down beside Emma. We stay. 2 hours passed. Marcus watched Claire work through the observation window, hands steady as she intubated the dog, started an IV, performed examinations with equipment that should have been replaced years ago. She moved like someone who'd made peace with inadequate resources, who'd learned to save lives with whatever tools came to hand. A volunteer brought Marcus coffee in a chipped mug. Emma befriended a 3-legged cat and asked 17 questions about animal medicine. Mrs. Martinez sat beside Marcus, quiet and knowing. She's very dedicated. She nearly drowned saving a dog. So did you. The observation landed harder than intended. Marcus hadn't thought about it that way. He'd just moved, reacting to Emma's fear, to the drowning woman, to some buried instinct he'd thought he'd killed with overwork and emotional numbness. Claire emerged at sunset, still damp, exhausted, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the polished women who attended his galas, and everything to do with competence and conviction. He's stable. Hypothermia, some water in the lungs, but he'll recover. Emma jumped up. Can I see him? Claire smiled for the first time, transformation that made her look younger, less burdened. Sure, but quiet, okay? He needs rest. Emma disappeared into the back room. Marcus stood, suddenly awkward in his borrowed sweatpants and Columbia University hoodie Mrs. Martinez had somehow procured. Thank you for saving him. Thank you for saving me. I went under before I could grab him. You would have died for a dog you didn't know. Claire met his eyes, unflinching. Everyone deserves help, even when they can't pay for it. The words hung between them, weighted with meanings Marcus was still unpacking. He pulled out his wallet, waterlogged but functional, and extracted a business card that had somehow survived. Let me take you to dinner. To say thank you. Suspicion flickered across her features. I don't need thanks. I did what anyone should have done. Please? Emma's voice from the doorway, the dog visible behind her in a recovery crate, tail wagging weakly. Daddy never takes me to dinner either. We could all go? Claire's defenses crumbled against an 8-year-old's honesty. She looked at Marcus, really looked, seeing past the expensive watch and the haircut that cost more than her weekly grocery budget, finding something underneath that maybe interested her despite her better judgment. Okay, but nowhere fancy. I'm still damp and I don't own the right clothes for fancy. Emma chose the restaurant, a diner 6 blocks from the clinic with cracked vinyl booths and a menu laminated so many times the words had started to fade. Marcus hadn't eaten in a place like this since college, before Sarah, before success, before he'd learned that money could insulate you from discomfort, but also from the texture of real life. They ordered burgers and fries. Emma talked non-stop about the 3-legged cat and whether animals understood when you were trying to help them, and could she volunteer at the clinic sometime? Please, please, please? Claire answered every question seriously, treating Emma like an adult worth engaging. Marcus watched them and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Presence. Not planning the next meeting or reviewing the last contract. Just existing here, now, in this moment, with his daughter and a woman who'd jumped into a frozen pond without hesitation. What do you do? Claire asked, attention shifting to him. I run a tech company. We develop software solutions for enterprise clients. Her expression didn't change. No recognition, no calculation. She genuinely had no idea who he was. Sounds profitable. The word landed like an accusation and a question. Marcus took a drink of water, buying time. It is. Very. Must be nice. Having resources. Being able to afford things. Emma, oblivious to the tension. Daddy has meetings all the time, even at dinner. Marcus winced. Claire's eyes sharpened, understanding clicking into place. Ah, you're one of those. One of what? People who mistake being busy for being alive. The words should have been an insult, should have made him defensive. Instead, they felt like diagnosis, precise and damning and entirely accurate. Sarah had said something similar 3 months before she died, in the hospital room he'd visited for 20 minutes between a board meeting and a conference call with the West Coast team. That's not fair. You don't know me. You're right. I don't. Claire stood, fumbling for her wallet. Marcus waved her off. I've got it. I can pay for my own meal. I know you can. But I invited you. Please. The please did it. Claire sat back down, jaw tight, accepting charity she clearly hated accepting. They finished eating in uncomfortable silence. Emma asked if she could have ice cream. Marcus said yes. Claire said nothing, but her eyes tracked Emma's delight with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Something like longing, or regret, or the particular sadness of people who've learned not to want things they can't have. Outside the diner, Marcus tried again. Can I see you again? Why? Because you jumped into a frozen pond to save a dying dog. Because my daughter hasn't smiled this much in months. Because I haven't had a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell me something or buy something in years. Claire studied him like he was a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. I work 2 jobs. I live in a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens. I eat ramen 3 nights a week, and my car is held together with hope and duct tape. We're from different planets. So teach me about yours. You wouldn't last a day. Emma tugged on Claire's sleeve. Please, I want to see Captain again. Captain? That's the dog's name. I decided. Claire's laugh was surprise and surrender. Okay, you can visit Captain, but I can't promise anything beyond that. Marcus pulled out his phone, miraculously still functional after its swim, and they exchanged numbers. Claire left on her bike, still damp, pedaling into the November dark like someone who'd long ago accepted that life was hard and cold, and you kept moving anyway. Emma took Marcus's hand for the walk back to the car. I like her, Daddy. Me too, sweetheart. She's different from your work people. How so? Emma considered this with the seriousness of someone 3 times her age. She sees people, not just what they can do for her. The observation cut deeper than Emma knew. Marcus had spent 5 years surrounding himself with people who wanted things from him: investments, promotions, access, connections. Even his board members, even his oldest friends. Everyone wanted something. Claire had made it clear she wanted nothing, least of all his money. That night, after Emma was asleep and Mrs. Martinez had gone home, Marcus stood at his penthouse windows, looking out at a city he'd conquered without ever really seeing. Somewhere in Queens, Claire was probably eating ramen, probably reviewing clinic finances that didn't add up, probably planning how to save the next animal with resources that wouldn't stretch. He thought about the Henderson contract waiting for his signature, thought about the Chicago meeting that would determine whether Reed Industries secured a $200 million investment, thought about the life he'd built from nothing after Sarah died, the empire of busyness and achievement that filled every hour so he never had to feel the absence where love used to live. Then he thought about Claire's hands on that dog, refusing to let go even as she drowned. Emma's face when he'd jumped in after her. The crack in his careful emotional armor that had opened the moment cold water closed over his head. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Thank you for dinner, and for jumping in after me. You didn't have to do that." Marcus typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, "Thank you for showing Emma what courage looks like." The reply came instantly. "She showed me too. She gave Captain her coat without hesitating. You're raising a good human." "I'm trying, mostly failing." "Join the club. See you when you visit Captain." Marcus set his phone down and allowed himself something he hadn't permitted in 5 years. Hope. Not the corporate kind, tied to quarterly projections and market share. The dangerous kind that opened doors to possibility and pain in equal measure. The following Saturday, Marcus showed up at Pause and Hope with Emma in tow. He'd dressed down, jeans, sweater, leather jacket, trying to look less like himself. Claire spotted them through the window and waved, hands deep in a St. Bernard's matted fur. Emma ran inside without waiting. Marcus followed more slowly, taking in details he'd missed during the emergency. Walls covered in thank you cards from clients who couldn't afford to say it with money. A donation jar on the counter holding maybe $40 in change. Claire's veterinary degree from Cornell framed beside a photo of a woman who looked like Claire 20 years older, smiling despite obvious exhaustion. "That's my mom," Claire said, appearing at his elbow. "She died the week after I graduated. Worked 3 jobs to put me through vet school." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She got to see me finish. That's more than some people get." The casual acceptance of tragedy made Marcus's chest tight. His own parents were alive and wealthy in Connecticut, playing golf and attending charity dinners, occasionally remembering they had a son and granddaughter they saw twice a year. She'd be proud of this place. "This place is barely holding on. We're short on rent. Equipment is ancient. I can't pay myself most months." But yeah, she'd be proud. The vulnerability underneath the pragmatism caught Marcus off guard. Claire turned away before he could respond, calling out to Emma, who'd found Captain recovering in a large crate, tail wagging at the sight of his rescuers. The day unfolded in unexpected directions. Emma helped Claire examine a cat with an abscess. Marcus cleaned kennels under the supervision of a volunteer named Maria, who found his incompetence hilarious and his willingness to try endearing. He scrubbed floors he'd never scrubbed, carried bags of donated food he'd never touched, and at no point did anyone treat him like Marcus Reed, CEO. He was just another pair of hands, mediocre at manual labor, but present and trying. Claire worked through lunch, through the afternoon, through an emergency call about a dog hit by a car that she treated in the back of someone's truck because they couldn't afford to transport him to the clinic. Marcus watched her save that dog with supplies she'd probably have to replace from her own paycheck. Watched her refuse payment. Watched her smile at the owner's gratitude like that was currency enough. Evening came. The clinic emptied. Maria left with a knowing look and a whispered, "He's cute, Claire," that made Claire blush and scowl in equal measure. Emma had fallen asleep in a chair, exhausted from excitement and purpose. Marcus found Claire in the back room, washing instruments by hand because the autoclave had broken weeks ago and she couldn't afford to fix it. "Let me help." "You don't have to." "I want to." They worked in silence, passing instruments between them, falling into an easy rhythm. Claire's hands were scarred and capable, nails short, no jewelry. Working hands. Real hands. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus ventured. "Sure." "Why do this? The free clinic, I mean. You could make more money at a regular practice." Claire was quiet for a long moment, considering how much truth to offer. "My mom used to say that how you treat the helpless tells you who you really are. Animals can't pay. Homeless people can't pay. Poor people can barely pay. But they love their animals just as much as rich people do. Maybe more, because those animals are often all they have." She set down the instrument she'd been cleaning. "I could make more money somewhere else, but I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror." The answer was simple and devastating. A repudiation of everything Marcus had built his life around. Profit, growth, market domination, success measured in dollars and influence rather than lives saved and dignity preserved. "I respect that." "But you don't understand it." "No, but I'd like to." Claire looked at him fully then, really seeing him for the first time since the pond. Marcus felt exposed under that gaze, all his armor stripped away, the successful CEO revealing the exhausted father underneath. "Why are you really here, Marcus? And don't say it's for Emma to see Captain." "Maybe I needed to see what it looks like when someone actually lives their values, instead of just talking about them at shareholder meetings. That's a heavy burden to put on a stranger." "You're not a stranger. You're the woman who almost drowned saving a dog, who refused my charity but accepted my help, who sees my daughter as a person instead of the Reed Industries heiress." Claire dried her hands slowly, buying time. "I can't be your redemption project. I have enough to carry without adding someone else's midlife crisis." The words were harsh, but not unkind. Marcus absorbed them, recognized the truth underneath. "You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. But you can come back next Saturday, if you want, to volunteer. Not to save your soul or whatever this is, just to help." It was more than he deserved, and exactly what he needed. "I'd like that." "Good. Because we need someone to clean the cat litter boxes, and Maria says you're terrible at it, so you need more practice." Marcus laughed, real and unguarded, a sound he hadn't made in years. Claire smiled back, defenses lowering just slightly, enough to let him see the woman underneath the armor. They carried sleeping Emma to the car together. Mrs. Martinez had the evening off, so it was just Marcus and his daughter and the strange intimacy of the moment. Claire tucked Emma's seatbelt around her with a tenderness that made Marcus's throat tight. "She's special," Claire said quietly. "She is. I don't tell her that enough." "Then tell her, while you still can. Time moves faster than you think." The loss in her voice was fresh, despite being years old. Marcus wanted to ask about her mother, about what it was like to watch someone work themselves to death for your future. But Emma stirred, mumbling something about Captain, and the moment passed. Marcus drove home through Saturday night traffic, Emma asleep in the back seat, his hands still smelling faintly of antiseptic. His phone had 37 unread emails, calls from his COO, his head of legal, board members wanting updates on deals he couldn't bring himself to care about right now. He thought about Claire washing instruments by hand, about her mother, who died knowing her daughter would keep the promise they'd made together, about the clients who'd never be able to pay, who walked out of that clinic with their animals saved and their dignity intact, because one woman had decided that purpose mattered more than profit. On Thursday, Marcus sat in a conference room in his Manhattan office, tie perfectly knotted, presentation polished, and realized he'd rather be cleaning litter boxes in Queens. The investors talked about growth projections and market penetration and synergies that meant nothing beyond making rich people richer. His COO, Richard, presented the third quarter numbers with the enthusiasm of a man who'd tied his identity to percentage points. Marcus's phone buzzed under the table. Text from Emma. "Don't forget my play tonight, 6 p.m. He looked at his calendar. Chicago. The investor meeting that would secure $200 million in funding, the deal he'd been building toward for 6 months. He'd confirmed his flight yesterday. He was scheduled to leave for the airport in 3 hours. Emma's words from the park echoed. "Daddy never takes me to dinner either." Claire's voice. "She's special. Tell her while you still can." Sarah's last coherent words before the morphine took her. "Don't let work be the thing you remember when she's grown." Marcus stood up in the middle of Richard's presentation. "I need to make a call." He walked out of the conference room, down the hall, into his corner office, with views of Manhattan spreading out like a kingdom he'd conquered without ever learning to rule himself. He called the head of the Chicago investor group. "Mr. Reed, we're looking forward to tomorrow." "I can't make it. Family emergency." Silence on the other end, surprise and calculation. "This is a crucial meeting. We've structured everything around your attendance." "I understand. Send Richard Chen, my COO. He knows the deal better than I do anyway." "They want to meet with you specifically. That was the agreement." "Then we'll reschedule. But I won't be there tomorrow." He hung up before the investor could respond, before he could talk himself out of it, before the fear could take hold. His phone rang immediately. Richard. "Marcus, what the hell? That's a $200 million deal." "And Emma's plays tonight at 6. I'm going." "You're throwing away 6 months of work for a school play?" "I'm choosing my daughter. For once." He ended the call, sat in his chair, waited for the regret to arrive. It didn't. Instead, he felt something lighter, cleaner, like he'd been holding his breath for 5 years and finally remembered how to exhale. Emma's play was a Thanksgiving pageant, elementary school children in construction paper costumes reciting lines about pilgrims and Native Americans with a kind of historical accuracy that made educated adults wince. Emma was a turkey, which she'd been vocally opposed to but had accepted with theatrical resignation. Marcus sat in the audience, phone silenced, emails ignored, present in a way he hadn't been present for anything in recent memory. Other parents flanked him, mostly mothers, a few fathers checking phones and watches. He recognized the impulse, the pull of something more important happening somewhere else. But then Emma took the stage in her brown feather costume, saw him in the audience, and her whole face transformed. Pure joy, uncomplicated delight that her father had shown up. Marcus felt his chest crack open, grief and love pouring through the fissure. Sarah should be here. Sarah who'd loved school plays and parent-teacher conferences and all the small, boring, crucial moments that built a childhood. Sarah who'd asked him 1 month before she died to be a better father than he was a husband. He'd failed that promise for 5 years, but tonight he was keeping it. Emma's performance was enthusiastic, if not particularly accurate. She forgot her lines twice. She waved at Marcus in the middle of another child's monologue. She was perfect. After the play, Emma ran to him and he caught her, lifting her up despite the fact that she was getting too big for it, that 8-year-olds were supposed to be too cool for public displays of affection. "You came! You actually came!" "I told you I would." "No, you didn't. You said you had a meeting in Chicago." "I canceled it." Emma pulled back to study his face, checking for lies or conditions. You canceled a meeting to come to my play? I did. She hugged him again, fierce and tight. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than any meeting, more than anything. Mrs. Martinez appeared beside them, eyes suspiciously bright. That was quite a performance. Emma launched into a detailed analysis of who'd forgotten their lines and whether turkeys were really present at the first Thanksgiving, and could they get ice cream to celebrate. Marcus agreed to ice cream, to whatever Emma wanted, this night that felt like the first night of something new. His phone buzzed. Claire. How was the play? Perfect. Thank you for reminding me what matters. Any time. See you Saturday for litter box duty. Marcus smiled at the phone like a teenager instead of a 38-year-old CEO. Who's that? Emma asked, ice cream already smeared on her face. Claire. I told her about your play. Did she want to come? I didn't invite her. You should have. She would have liked it. She told me she never got to do school plays because her mom was always working. The observation hit Marcus like cold water. Claire giving up her childhood so her mother could work 3 jobs. Emma giving up her father's presence so he could build an empire. The same sacrifice from different angles, both wrong, both avoidable. Next time, Marcus promised. I'll invite her to the next one. Saturday came. Marcus arrived at the clinic with coffee, cheap diner coffee, not the artisanal stuff he usually drank, and bagels from the place Maria had mentioned. Claire took the coffee with surprised gratitude, took a sip, and immediately started coughing. What is this? Coffee, from the diner on the corner. This is coffee that's been sitting on a burner since 1987. Maria was messing with you. She poured it out and made fresh coffee on a machine that looked like it had served in both world wars. The result was strong and bitter, and somehow better than anything Marcus's personal barista had ever made. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Marcus and Emma every Saturday, sometimes Sunday too. He learned the names of the regular clients, James with his 3-legged pit bull, Sarah with her ancient cat, Miguel, who brought in injured strays he found in alleys. He learned which supplies the clinic needed, which equipment was held together with prayer, which animals had the best chance of survival. He learned Claire. She hummed while she worked, off-key and unconscious. She talked to the animals like they understood every word. She cried when she lost patience, but never in front of clients. She ate lunch at her desk, if she ate it at all. She worked 70-hour weeks and never complained. She was brilliant and stubborn and completely unable to accept help, even when she desperately needed it. Marcus found himself thinking about her between Saturdays, during board meetings, during conference calls, during the long evenings when Emma was asleep and the penthouse felt like a mausoleum instead of a home. It was mid-December, 3 weeks before Christmas, when everything shifted. Late Saturday night, emergency surgery on a dog hit by a car. Marcus had stayed to help, even though Emma had gone home with Mrs. Martinez hours ago. Claire worked with focused intensity, hands steady despite exhaustion, pulling the dog back from death through competence and will. They saved him. German Shepherd mix, young and strong enough to survive what should have been fatal. Claire closed the incision, cleaned her instruments, and finally allowed herself to collapse against the wall. Marcus sat beside her on the floor, both of them exhausted, the clinic quiet except for the recovering dog's breathing. You're incredible, he said quietly. You know that? Claire turned to look at him, hair falling out of its ponytail, scrubs stained, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with polish and everything to do with purpose. I'm terrified. Every time. That I won't be good enough. That my hands will slip, or I'll make the wrong call, or I'll lose them. But you keep doing it anyway. What's the alternative? Let them die because I'm scared? Marcus understood then that he'd been doing exactly that. Letting himself die. The parts that mattered, the parts that felt and risked and loved, because he was terrified of loss. Sarah's death had been a preview of what happened when you let yourself care about something you couldn't control. So he'd stopped caring. Buried himself in work that could be controlled, measured, optimized.
"You're more than good enough," he said, and meant it in ways that went beyond veterinary skill. Claire held his gaze, something shifting in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or permission. She leaned forward. He leaned in to meet her. The kiss was soft and uncertain, both of them out of practice, both of them terrified, both of them brave enough to try anyway. When they pulled apart, Claire's eyes were wide. "This is complicated." "I know." "I'm not Sarah. I can't fill that hole in your life." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be Claire. Just Claire." She studied him, weighing truth against fear. "I don't know how to do this. I haven't dated anyone seriously in 5 years. Work takes everything. So we figure it out. Together. Slowly." "Nothing about you is slow. You're Marcus Reed, CEO, master of the corporate universe." The name hung between them, and Marcus realized she still didn't fully understand who he was, didn't know about the $800 million company, the board seat worth tens of millions, the penthouse and the private jet, and all the other markers of wealth that separated their worlds. He should tell her. The moment was right there, obvious and necessary. But Emma's words stopped him. She sees people, not what they can do for her. If he told Claire the truth about his wealth, everything would change. She'd see him differently, treat him differently. The easy partnership they'd built over Saturday mornings in litter boxes would fracture under the weight of his net worth. So he kissed her again instead, putting off honesty for a future version of himself who was braver. 2 months into whatever this was, relationship felt too definitive, friendship too distant, Marcus found himself cooking dinner with Emma on a Tuesday night. Actually cooking, not ordering in or having Mrs. Martinez handle it. The pasta sauce was burning. Emma was laughing at his incompetence. His phone buzzed with 17 urgent messages from Richard about the Henderson acquisition that was falling apart without his direct involvement. Marcus ignored them all. Claire arrived at 7, still in scrubs from an emergency spay that had run long, carrying takeout containers because she'd correctly assumed Marcus's cooking would be inedible. Emma launched herself at Claire with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found a co-conspirator in the project of making her father more human. They ate the Thai food Claire had brought, sitting around the kitchen island instead of the formal dining table that seated 12 and made every meal feel like a corporate dinner. Emma dominated the conversation with stories about her science fair project on volcanic eruptions, demonstrating with violent hand gestures that sent rice flying. Claire listened with genuine interest, asked follow-up questions, treated an 8-year-old's enthusiasms as worthy of adult attention. Marcus watched them and felt the weight of everything he hadn't said, pressing down like a physical force. 3 months of Saturday mornings at the clinic, dinners twice a week, coffee dates when Claire's schedule allowed, long phone calls after Emma went to bed, talking about everything except the truth that sat between them like a landmine, waiting for the wrong step. She still thought he was just an executive, well paid but normal.
She didn't know about the private jet, or the board seats, or the fact that the watch he'd stopped wearing around her cost more than her annual salary. The omission had started as self-preservation and calcified into deception. Emma excused herself to finish homework, leaving Marcus and Claire alone with the debris of dinner and the comfortable silence that had developed between them. Claire started clearing plates. Marcus helped, their movements synchronized from repetition. "Emma's thriving," Claire observed, rinsing a dish.
"She's different than when I first met her. Lighter. You're good for her. You're good for her. You're actually here now, present instead of performing." The compliment landed with the sting of accurate criticism. Marcus had been performing for 5 years, playing the role of devoted single father while actually being an absent workaholic who'd outsourced parenting to Mrs. Martinez and expensive private schools. "I'm trying to be better." "I know. I see it." Claire set down the dish, turned to face him fully. Her hair was escaping its ponytail, exhaustion evident in the shadows under her eyes. She'd worked another 70-hour week on a salary that barely covered her rent. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus's stomach clenched with the certainty that this was it, the moment where truth forced its way out. "Of course." "Why me? You could date anyone. Socialites, executives, women who fit into your world. Why a broke vet who works in a free clinic? Because you see me instead of my net worth, Marcus thought. Because you demanded nothing while everyone else wanted everything. Because you make me feel like Marcus instead of Marcus Reed, CEO. Because you jumped into a frozen pond without hesitating. Because you taught my daughter what courage looks like. Because you're the first person in 5 years who's made me want to be someone other than the man I've become. Claire's expression softened, walls lowering in increments. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you barely know. Then let me know you better. She kissed him then, urgent and needing, backed him against the counter with an intensity that suggested she was as tired of pretending as he was. Marcus responded in kind, hands finding the small of her back, pulling her closer, losing himself in the permission to want something beyond quarterly earnings and market share. They broke apart, breathing hard. Claire rested her forehead against his chest. "This is terrifying." "I know." "I don't do relationships well. I work too much. I'm always broke. I have trust issues from my dad leaving and commitment issues from watching my mom work herself to death. I'm a disaster." "I'm a widower who replaced grief with 60-hour work weeks and emotional unavailability. I've failed at every relationship since Sarah died. I'm equally a disaster." "Maybe we can be disasters together." It was the closest thing to a commitment either of them had voiced. Marcus kissed her again, softer this time, sealing an agreement that felt both inevitable and impossible. January arrived with the kind of cold that made New York feel actively hostile to human life. Marcus had scaled back his work schedule dramatically, delegating to Richard and the rest of the executive team, showing up to the office 3 days a week instead of 6. The board was quietly furious. Stock prices had dipped. Shareholders were asking questions. Marcus couldn't bring himself to care. He made Emma breakfast every morning, walked her to school when weather permitted, attended every parent-teacher conference, every playdate, every minor event that had previously been beneath his notice. Mrs. Martinez watched this transformation with approval and concern in equal measure. "Mr. Reed, the office called again. They need you to sign off on the Dallas acquisition. Tell them to email the documents." "They did. You haven't opened them." Marcus looked up from helping Emma with her math homework, fractions, which he'd forgotten were this complicated, and saw Mrs. Martinez's expression. Not judgment exactly, more like watching someone walk toward a cliff edge. I'll handle it tonight. They're saying you've changed, that you're distracted. I'm present. There's a difference. Mrs. Martinez nodded slowly, choosing her next words with care. Your father called. He wants to meet for lunch. Marcus hadn't spoken to William Reed in 3 months. A personal record. His father served as chairman of Reed Industries Board, a position he took seriously despite being semi-retired. William measured success in dollars and influence, considered emotions a weakness, and had loved Sarah only because she made Marcus more effective. Tell him I'm busy. I already did. He's coming here Thursday at noon. He said it wasn't a request. Of course not. William Reed didn't request, he commanded, and the world generally bent to accommodate him. Thursday arrived with sleet and his father's disapproval in equal measure. William appeared at the penthouse in an immaculate suit that probably cost more than Claire's monthly expenses, regarding Marcus's jeans and Columbia sweatshirt with the kind of disdain usually reserved for criminal behavior. You look like a graduate student. Nice to see you too, Dad. William settled into the leather chair that had been Sarah's favorite, accepted coffee from Mrs. Martinez with a curt nod, and got directly to business. The board is concerned. You've missed 4 meetings. The Dallas acquisition is stalled because you won't engage. Shareholders are asking if you're having a breakdown. I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm actually living my life instead of optimizing other people's portfolios. You have a responsibility to the company, to the employees, to the shareholders who trusted you with their investments. I also have a responsibility to my daughter, which I've neglected for 5 years while building an empire I don't even enjoy. William's jaw tightened, the only outward sign of displeasure he permitted himself. This is about that veterinarian, isn't it? Marcus should have been surprised his father knew about Claire. Should have been, but wasn't. William kept tabs on everything that might affect Reed Industries' bottom line, and the CEO's personal life absolutely qualified. Her name is Claire. She runs a free clinic in Queens, lives in a studio apartment, drives a car from 2012, student loan debt in the 6 figures. The casual recitation of Claire's financial situation made Marcus's hands curl into fists. You had her investigated? Of course I did. You're dating someone? I make sure she's not after your money. She doesn't even know how much money I have. She thinks I'm just an executive taking a sabbatical. William's eyebrows rose, genuine surprise breaking through his usual control. You haven't told her? No. Why the hell not? Because the moment she knows, everything changes. She'll see Marcus Reed billionaire instead of just Marcus. She'll either want the money or resent it. Either way, I lose. So you're lying to her. I'm omitting information. That's lying, son, and it's going to explode in your face when she finds out. Marcus stood, paced to the windows overlooking Central Park. Below, people moved through their lives ignorant of the conversation happening 40 stories above. What do you want, Dad? Really? I want you to come back to work full-time, or step down permanently and let Richard run the company. This half-in, half-out approach is killing shareholder confidence. I need 6 months to figure out how to be a father, to see if this thing with Claire is real. And if the board forces a vote, if they decide you're no longer fit to lead, then I'll step down. The company will survive. Emma might not if I keep abandoning her. William was quiet for a long moment, studying his son with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Finally, the older man stood, adjusted his tie, and delivered his verdict. You get 3 months, not 6.
3 months to decide if you're coming back or resigning.
After that, I can't hold off the board anymore. That's not enough time. That's what you have. Use it wisely. And Marcus, tell that woman the truth. The longer you wait, the worse it will be.
William left, taking his disapproval and surprising wisdom with him. Mrs. Martinez appeared with fresh coffee and the kind of maternal concern that had sustained Marcus through Sarah's death. He's not wrong about telling her.
I know.
The longer you wait, I know, Helen. I just need to find the right moment. There is no right moment for admitting you've been lying for 3 months. There's only the least wrong moment, and you're running out of those. The following Saturday, Marcus arrived at the clinic to find Claire in her office, surrounded by paperwork and despair. The sight stopped him in the doorway, Emma brushing past to find Captain, who'd become a permanent resident and unofficial clinic mascot.
What's wrong? Claire looked up, and Marcus saw the kind of exhaustion that went beyond physical tiredness into existential defeat.
Rent's going up. Landlord wants an extra $800 a month starting March 1st. We're already short. There's no way. She gestured at the spreadsheet on her ancient laptop, numbers that didn't add up no matter how many times she rearranged them. Marcus pulled up a chair, looked at the finances she'd been trying to hide from him for months. The clinic ran on donations, volunteer labor, and Claire's willingness to work for essentially nothing. One major expense could sink the whole operation.
Let me help. I can loan you.
No. The word was immediate and absolute.
Claire, be reasonable. This is your life's work.
Which means it's my responsibility to save it, not yours.
Partners help each other.
We're not partners in this. We're dating. That doesn't give you the right to rescue me with money I can't pay back.
The rejection stung more than it should have. Marcus wanted to argue, to point out that the amount she needed was less than he spent on wine in a quarter.
But Claire's pride was a wall he'd learned not to assault directly. Then let me help another way. Fundraiser. I know people who donate to causes. Let me make some calls. Suspicion flickered across her features. What kind of people? Wealthy people. The kind who write checks to feel good about themselves. Why not direct some of that towards something that actually matters? Claire considered this, clearly torn between desperate need and deep reluctance to accept help from Marcus's world. One fundraiser. Small. No media, no publicity. Just people and donations. Deal. Marcus spent the next week making calls to contacts he'd accumulated over 15 years in business. Most said yes immediately, either from genuine interest or the desire to stay connected to Marcus Reed, even in semi-retirement.
He secured a venue, Friends Art Gallery in Chelsea, and commitments from 30 people who could collectively write checks that would save the clinic for years. He didn't tell Claire exactly who was coming, didn't mention that the guest list included 2 Fortune 500 CEOs, a hedge fund manager worth 9 figures, and the kind of social elite who made the society pages weekly. That was a problem for future Marcus to handle. The fundraiser was scheduled for a Friday evening in mid-February. Marcus picked Claire up from her apartment, the first time he'd seen where she lived. The building was exactly as William had described, old, cramped, located in a neighborhood that required vigilance. Claire's studio was on the 4th floor, no elevator, heating temperamental at best. She opened the door wearing the only dress she owned, a simple black number she'd bought secondhand and altered herself. No jewelry except small silver studs she'd had since high school. Hair down for once, makeup minimal. She was stunning in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with inherent grace.
You look beautiful. You look terrified. What's wrong? Everything, Marcus thought. I've been lying to you for months, and you're about to find out exactly how much." "Nothing. Just want tonight to go well." They took a car service to Chelsea, Claire making nervous conversation about meeting his friends, about whether she'd fit in, about feeling out of place in rooms full of wealth. Marcus held her hand and tried to project confidence he didn't feel. The gallery was already full when they arrived, 50 people instead of the 30 Marcus had invited, evidence of how hungry his world was for access to him, even in diminished form. Claire stepped through the door and froze, taking in the crowd, the champagne, the casual display of wealth that probably represented more money than she'd see in a lifetime. "Marcus, who are these people?" "Donors. People who want to help." A woman approached, dripping in diamonds, air-kissing Marcus on both cheeks. "Marcus Reed, you've been hiding from us. Everyone's dying to know what you've been doing with your sabbatical." She turned to Claire with the kind of smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "And you must be the reason. I'm Jennifer Hastings. My husband runs Hastings Capital." Claire shook the offered hand mechanically, her expression shifting from nervousness to confusion to the dawning realization that something was very wrong. "Nice to meet you." Jennifer monopolized Marcus for the next 5 minutes, gossip and business talk and pointed questions about when he was coming back to save Reed Industries from Richard's mediocre leadership. Claire stood beside him, growing quieter with each name drop, each casual reference to wealth and influence. When Jennifer finally moved on, Claire turned to Marcus with eyes that had gone flat and dangerous.
Reed Industries? As in Marcus Reed? The Marcus Reed? The moment he'd been dreading had arrived, not in private where he could explain, but in public, surrounded by the evidence of everything he'd hidden. "I can explain. You're not just an executive, you're the CEO. You're Marcus Reed." Her voice stayed level, controlled, but Marcus could see the fury building underneath like pressure in a sealed container. "Technically, I stepped back." Don't you dare minimize this right now." She walked away, headed for the exit. Marcus followed, aware of the eyes tracking their movement, the gossip already forming. He caught her arm in the gallery's foyer, away from the crowd. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 3 months? That you let me cry about rent money while you're worth hundreds of millions? That you made me feel like we were equals when you were slumming it with the poor vet for entertainment?" "It wasn't like that. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to see me. Just me. Not the money."
"You don't get to decide what I see. You took that choice away by lying." Her voice cracked, anger giving way to something more painful. Betrayal. The specific hurt of trusting someone who'd proven unworthy. "I'm sorry. I should have told you from the beginning." "Yes, you should have. But you didn't. You let me talk about my student loans and my broken car and my struggles, while you could have fixed everything with pocket change. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" Marcus did, actually, but saying so would only make things worse. "What do you want me to say? I made a mistake. I kept making it. You thought wrong. We're done. Don't call me. Don't come to the clinic. Just stay in your world and let me stay in mine." She walked out, hailing a cab Marcus knew she couldn't afford, leaving him alone in the foyer with the sound of champagne glasses clinking and his careful deception collapsing around him. He should go after her, should fight for this, for them. Instead, he stood frozen, watching her cab disappear into February darkness, and felt the familiar numbness settling back in. Easier to feel nothing than to feel everything he'd just lost. Marcus returned to the party on autopilot, shook hands, accepted congratulations on the successful fundraiser that would save Claire's clinic while destroying their relationship. He smiled and nodded and collected checks from people who saw charity as social currency. By the end of the evening, he'd raised $80,000, more than enough to cover the rent increase and buy new equipment and ensure the clinic's survival for years. The victory felt hollow, worse than hollow.
Like he'd traded something irreplaceable for money that meant nothing to him. He went home to the empty penthouse, the silence pressing down like physical weight. Emma was asleep at a friend's house. Mrs. Martinez had the night off. Just Marcus and his expensive furniture and the view of a city he'd conquered without ever learning to live in it. His phone buzzed. Text from Richard. Heard the fundraiser was successful. Also heard you had a public fight with your girlfriend. Board is already asking questions. Call me. Marcus threw the phone across the room, heard it hit the wall with a satisfying crack. Then he poured himself 3 fingers of scotch older than Emma and sat in the dark, trying to remember what it felt like before Claire, before hope, before he'd allowed himself to want something that mattered. 2 weeks passed, the worst 2 weeks of Marcus's life since Sarah died, and that was saying something. He threw himself back into work with the desperation of a drowning man clutching debris, attended every meeting, reviewed every contract, made the board happy by being the Marcus Reed they remembered, efficient and emotionless and always available. Emma noticed immediately. Where's Claire? She's busy, sweetheart. She's always busy, but she used to make time. Did you do something? The accuracy of an 8-year-old's insight was devastating. We had a disagreement. About what? How to explain that he'd destroyed the best thing in his life through cowardice and deception, that he'd been so afraid of losing her he'd guaranteed it through lying. Adult things. It's complicated. Emma's expression hardened in a way that reminded Marcus painfully of Sarah. You always say things are complicated when you don't want to admit you messed up. Did you mess up with Claire? Yes. Then fix it. If only it were that simple. Marcus had called 17 times, left 11 voicemails, sent texts that progressed from apology to begging to acceptance. Claire had blocked his number. When he'd tried to visit the clinic, Maria had met him at the door with folded arms and maternal fury. She doesn't want to see you. I need to explain. You had 3 months to explain. You chose lying instead. Now you get to live with that choice. Please, just tell her I'm sorry. She knows you're sorry. Sorry doesn't fix betrayal. Marcus had left, tail between his legs, and tried to figure out how to make amends to someone who wouldn't speak to him. The answer arrived via Emma, who'd apparently maintained her own relationship with Claire through secret texts and calls. Marcus discovered this when his daughter announced at breakfast that Claire was volunteering at a vaccination clinic in the Bronx on Saturday, and maybe they could go help. She invited you? She invited me. You're just my ride. Manipulative and transparent, but Marcus was desperate enough to accept any opening. Saturday found him driving Emma to a community center in the South Bronx, legitimate veterinary operation, partnering with Claire's clinic to provide free shots for neighborhood pets. Claire was in the parking lot unloading supplies when they arrived. She saw Marcus and her whole body tensed, fight-or-flight response visible in her shoulders. But Emma was already running toward her, and Claire's face softened as she caught his daughter in a hug. Hey, kiddo. You ready to help? Always. Is Captain here? Waiting inside specifically for you. Emma disappeared into the community center, leaving Marcus and Claire alone beside her ancient Honda, trunk full of medical supplies and uncomfortable silence. I didn't know you'd be here. Emma may have failed to mention that detail. Claire pulled out a box of syringes, wouldn't meet his eyes. You don't have to stay.
Emma can get a ride home with Maria. I want to stay, if you'll let me. It's a free country. Not forgiveness, but not rejection either. Marcus took what he could get and spent the next 4 hours doing whatever Claire asked without argument or excuses. He held dogs for vaccinations, filled out paperwork, kept children calm while their pets got shots, worked beside Claire in the careful silence of two people who'd been intimate and were now strangers. The clinic wrapped at 3. Emma was in the community center playing with Captain and 3 other dogs supervised by volunteers, giving Marcus and Claire a few minutes alone as they packed supplies. Thank you for letting me help. You're good at it. Better than you used to be. I've had practice. Claire closed the trunk, finally looked at him directly.
Why didn't you tell me, really? Marcus had prepared this answer, rehearsed it, but standing here with Claire's hurt visible in every line of her body, the practiced words felt inadequate. Because you saw me. Just Marcus. Not the company or the money or the expectations. You treated me like a normal person, and I was so starved for that, I couldn't risk losing it. So you lied instead. I omitted, which I know is the same thing. I'm not defending it. I'm just trying to explain. And the fundraiser? All those people who could write checks bigger than my annual salary? Was that you showing off? Proving you could save my clinic with pocket change? That was me trying to help the only way I knew how. I didn't need saving. I needed honesty. The simple truth of that statement cut deeper than anger could have. Claire wrapped her arms around herself, February wind cutting through the parking lot. My dad left when I was 12, just walked out one day. No warning, no explanation. Took everything I thought was stable and revealed it was all built on lies. He'd been hiding another family, another life. We were the secret he kept from his real family. Marcus's chest tightened, understanding clicking into place. Claire, you reminded me of that. The secret keeping, the selective truth, the feeling of being kept in the dark for someone else's convenience. I can't do that again. I won't. I'm not your father. I wasn't keeping you secret. I was just afraid of losing you. And in trying to avoid losing me, you guaranteed it. Ironic, right? They stood in silence, words exhausted, the distance between them measured in broken trust rather than physical feet. Emma emerged from the community center, oblivious to the wreckage, chattering about Captain's progress and could they please adopt him because he clearly belonged with them. Claire knelt to Emma's level, gave her another hug, and spoke with the gentle honesty Marcus wished he'd managed 3 months ago. I can't see your dad right now, sweetheart. We need some time apart. Because he lied? He told you? I figured it out. Adults always say it's complicated when they mean I messed up. Is he like my mom? Going to leave and not come back? The question shattered something in Claire's expression. She pulled Emma closer. No, baby. Your dad isn't leaving you. He loves you more than anything. We just need to figure some things out. But you're leaving. I'm not leaving you. You can call me any time. We can still be friends.
I just can't be around your dad right now." Emma absorbed this with the solemn acceptance of a child used to adults disappointing her. She hugged Claire one more time, then walked to Marcus's car without looking back. Claire stood slowly, met Marcus's eyes. "She deserves better than watching adults hurt each other."
"I know. I'm sorry she's caught in this." "Me too." Claire got in her car and drove away, taillights disappearing into Bronx traffic. Marcus stood in the empty parking lot, feeling like he'd been hollowed out and filled with cement. Then he went to comfort his daughter, who was crying in the passenger seat because another person she loved had been taken away by adult mistakes she couldn't control. March arrived with the board's ultimatum: return to full-time leadership or resign permanently. No more half measures. Richard delivered the message in person, sitting in Marcus's office with the awkward sympathy of someone who knew he was twisting the knife. "They're not wrong, Marcus. You're distracted. The Dallas acquisition fell apart. We lost the Henderson account. Stock is down 18% from your high water mark. I gave them 3 months. You gave them 2 months of wallowing over a breakup. That's different." "I wasn't wallowing." "You showed up drunk to the February board meeting." "I wasn't drunk. I'd had 2 drinks. At 9 in the morning. Fair point. Marcus had been spiraling since the fundraiser, trying to fill the Claire-shaped hole with work and alcohol and the kind of self-destruction that made good decisions impossible. "What do you want me to say? I'll come back full-time, effective immediately." "Will you, though? Or will you last 3 weeks before another crisis pulls you away?" "There won't be another crisis." "There's always another crisis. That's life. The question is whether you can handle this job while also being a father and a human being. Sarah couldn't. She literally died trying." The observation was brutal and entirely accurate. Sarah had worked herself into exhaustion, ignored symptoms, delayed treatment because Marcus needed her to be the perfect corporate wife who made his professional life easier. By the time they caught the cancer, it was stage 4 and terminal. "I won't make that mistake again." "Then what's your plan? Because right now you're making different mistakes with the same outcome, pushing away everyone who matters while chasing success that doesn't fill the void." Marcus had no answer. Richard left him alone with the ultimatum and the dawning realization that he'd become exactly what he'd sworn he wouldn't be: his father. William Reed, who'd sacrificed family for empire and ended up wealthy, powerful, and fundamentally alone. That night, Emma refused dinner, refused to speak to him, locked herself in a room with Captain, they'd adopted him after all, Claire's parting gift, and wouldn't come out even when Mrs. Martinez tried her grandmother magic. Marcus sat outside Emma's door, back against the wall, and tried to remember when he'd become the villain in his daughter's story. "Emma, please, talk to me." Silence. Then, very quietly, "You promised you wouldn't leave like Mom. But you did. You came back to work all the time. You stopped being here even when you're here. I'm trying to provide for you, to give you everything. I don't want everything. I want you, and I want Claire. But you ruined that because you're too scared to let anyone actually matter." The accusation hit like buckshot, spread wide and impossible to dodge. Emma was 8 years old, and she'd diagnosed his problem with more accuracy than 3 years of therapy had managed. "You're right." "What?" Marcus leaned his head back against the door, exhausted by his own cowardice. "You're right. I've been scared. Of losing you the way I lost your mom. Of Claire leaving the way your mom did. So I kept everyone at arm's length and called it protection. but all I protected is my own fear. The door opened. Emma stood there in her pajamas, face blotchy from crying, holding Captain like a shield. So fix it. I don't know how. Yes, you do. You quit before. Quit again. Quit as us instead of the company. It's not that simple. It is that simple. You're just scared it won't work. Out of the mouths of babes came the truth Marcus had been avoiding. He was scared, terrified, actually, that quitting wouldn't solve anything, that Claire wouldn't forgive him regardless, that he'd sacrifice everything and still end up alone. But sitting here on the floor with his daughter's wisdom cutting through his rationalizations, Marcus realized the only thing more terrifying than failure was never trying at all. He pulled Emma into a hug. Okay, I'll fix it. I promise. For real this time? For real. The next morning, Marcus called an emergency board meeting. His father sat at the head of the table, expression neutral, waiting to see which version of his son would appear. Richard looked resigned. The other board members ranged from irritated to curious. Marcus stood at the front of the room and felt the weight of 15 years of building this company pressing down on his shoulders. Reed Industries was his legacy, his proof that Sarah's faith in him had been justified, his claim to mattering in a world that measured success in dollars and market share. It was also the thing that had killed his marriage, stolen his daughter's childhood, and made love feel like a liability instead of a gift. I'm resigning. Effective immediately. Richard will take over as CEO. The room erupted. Voices talking over each other, demanding explanations, questioning his sanity. William raised a hand, and silence fell. This is about the veterinarian. This is about my daughter. About being the father she deserves instead of the CEO you wanted me to be. You can be both. No, Dad, I can't. Sarah tried to be both your perfect daughter-in-law and a human being. It killed her. I won't make that mistake again. William's expression flickered, something that might have been pain crossing his features before control reasserted itself. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I'm keeping my shares. I'll stay on the board as a non-voting member, but I'm done running this company, done sacrificing my life for quarterly earnings. The stock will crater. Then it craters. I don't care anymore. Marcus looked around the table, seeing clearly for the first time in years. These people weren't his friends. They were business associates who measured his worth in profit margins. The moment he stopped being useful, they'd forget he existed. I'm sorry if this disappoints you, but I'm not sorry for the choice. He walked out of the conference room, down the hall, into his office for the last time as CEO. His assistant was already crying, having heard the news through the office grapevine that moved faster than light. Richard appeared in the doorway, expression complicated. You're really doing this? I am. What are you going to do instead? Be a father. Figure out how to win back the woman I love. Live smaller and better instead of bigger and emptier. Richard extended his hand. Good luck. You'll need it. They shook, 15 years of partnership ending in a handshake and mutual understanding that some things mattered more than success. Marcus cleaned out his desk, took the photo of Emma and Sarah that had been his only personal item, and left Reed Industries behind. The lobby had never felt more like a temple to the wrong gods. Outside, March wind cut through his suit. The last time he'd wear Armani to work because he had no more work to wear it to. He pulled out his phone and called Maria. I need to see Claire. She still doesn't want to see you. I quit. I'm not CEO anymore. I chose my daughter and a different life. Please, just ask her if she'll give me 5 minutes.
Maria was quiet for a long moment. "Wait here. I'll call you back." 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Then Maria's voice. "Saturday, the clinic, noon. 5 minutes, Marcus."
That's all she's promising.
That's all I need.
Saturday arrived with the slow inevitability of Judgment Day. Marcus, dressed in jeans and the Columbia sweatshirt Claire had once complimented, drove Emma to her friend's house because his daughter didn't need to witness another potential rejection, and arrived at Pause and Hope 15 minutes early to pace the parking lot like a convict awaiting sentencing. Maria met him at the door with folded arms and the protective fury of someone who'd watched Claire cry for 6 weeks.
5 minutes. She's serious.
I understand.
And Marcus, if you hurt her again, I know people who know people. Queens isn't as gentrified as you think.
The threat would have been funny if it wasn't entirely sincere. Marcus nodded, moved past her into the clinic that smelled like antiseptic and forgiveness he hadn't earned. Claire stood in the back room examining a tabby cat, hands steady despite the tension visible in her shoulders. She finished the examination, made notes on a chart, and only then acknowledged his presence.
You have 5 minutes.
No greeting, no warmth, just the clinical distance of someone who'd locked her heart behind steel and wasn't accepting visitors. I quit. I'm not CEO anymore. Richard took over 2 days ago. Claire's hands stilled on the chart.
Why?
Because Emma asked me to choose. Company or family? I chose family.
That's not my business anymore.
It is if you'll let it be. Claire, I know I lied. I know I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way. I know sorry doesn't fix that. But I'm done being the man who chooses fear over everything that matters. She finally looked at him, really looked, and Marcus saw the damage he'd inflicted written in the shadows under her eyes.
You think quitting your job fixes this? This isn't about your career. It's about you lying to me for 3 months.
About you making me feel like we were equals when you were slumming with the poor vet for entertainment. I never thought of it that way. How you thought of it doesn't matter. How I experienced it does.
You let me cry about rent while you could have bought my building with pocket change. You watched me stress about equipment costs you could have covered with a rounding error. You made me small.
The words landed like body blows.
Marcus wanted to defend himself, to explain that he'd been trying to preserve something precious. But Claire's pain wasn't theoretical. It was real and present and entirely his fault.
You're right. I made choices that hurt you. I can't undo that. I can only promise to do better going forward, if you'll give me the chance.
I gave you chances. 3 months of chances. You chose to keep lying.
Then what do you want from me?
Tell me how to fix this and I'll do it.
Claire set down the chart, turned to face him fully. I want you to understand that I can't be with someone who makes unilateral decisions about what I get to know. My dad did that. He decided my mom didn't need to know about his other family. He decided what truth we deserved. I won't live like that again. I'm not your father.
Prove it. Because right now, all I see is another man who thought he knew better than me what I could handle.
The accusation hung between them like smoke, choking off any easy resolution.
Marcus's 5 minutes were nearly up, and he'd accomplished nothing except confirming that some damage couldn't be undone with apologies and grand gestures.
I love you. Claire's expression didn't soften.
Love isn't enough. It never has been. My mom loved my dad, didn't stop him from leaving. Sarah loved you. Didn't stop you from choosing work over her health. Emma loves you. Hasn't stopped you from breaking promises. Each example was a knife between the ribs, accurate and devastating.
What do I have to do? Figure out how to be someone trustworthy. Then maybe we can talk. Maria appeared in the doorway, 5 minutes expired, expression sympathetic but firm. Marcus left without argument, climbed into his car, and sat in the parking lot watching Claire through the window as she returned to work like their conversation hadn't just ended whatever they'd been building. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma. Did she forgive you? Not yet. Keep trying. She's worth it. 8 years old and wiser than her father would ever be. The weeks that followed were an exercise in learning to exist without purpose. Marcus had been CEO for 15 years. Before that, climbing toward CEO. His entire adult identity had been built around the company, around achievement, around the relentless pursuit of more. Now he was just a man with too much money and no idea how to fill his days. He threw himself into being Emma's father with the intensity of the newly converted. Made breakfast every morning, complicated recipes from cookbooks he'd never opened. Walked her to school, even when it rained. Attended every parent-teacher conference, every school event, every minor milestone that used to pass unnoticed. Emma thrived under the attention, blooming like a plant that had been barely watered, finally getting what it needed. But nights were hard. Long stretches of quiet in the penthouse that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. Marcus started looking at real estate in Brooklyn, townhouses with yards and normal-sized rooms, and neighbors who didn't require net worth statements. Emma loved the idea. Mrs. Martinez thought he'd lost his mind, but supported the decision with the loyalty of 15 years. April arrived with cherry blossoms and a phone call Marcus had been dreading. William Reed requesting lunch, not asking, never asking. They met at his father's club, wood-paneled walls and leather chairs and old money thick in the air like cologne. You look terrible. Thanks, Dad. William signaled for drinks, studied his son with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating a business asset. Richard is doing well. Stock is stabilized. Board is satisfied with the transition. Good. You don't seem happy about it. Why would I be happy that my life's work is doing fine without me? Because it means you built something sustainable. Most founders can't let go. You did. That takes courage. The compliment from his father was so unexpected, Marcus nearly missed it. I didn't have a choice. I was destroying my relationship with Emma, with Claire, with myself. The veterinarian still won't see you? No. William sipped his scotch, expression thoughtful. Your mother left me. Did you know that? Marcus stared. What? Years ago, before you were born. We'd been married 5 years, and she couldn't take it anymore. The long hours, the emotional distance, the way I made everything secondary to building the company. She packed a bag and went to her sister's house in Connecticut. I never knew that, because I followed her. Quit the company I'd spent a decade building, told her she was more important than success. We started over, smaller life, less money, actually present with each other. That's when we had you. The revelation recontextualized Marcus's entire childhood. His parents had always seemed stable, distant, but functional. He'd never imagined the drama underneath. What made you go back? To business, I mean. You did. We wanted to give you everything. Private schools, opportunities, advantages. So I went back to work, and your mother went back to tolerating my absence. We told ourselves it was for you. Really, it was because we were too scared to stay in the intimacy we'd built. William finished his drink, signaled for another. Don't make our mistake, son. You have a chance at something real with that woman. Don't sacrifice it for pride or fear or the belief that providing is the same as loving. She won't see me. Then make her see you. Grand gestures, persistence, whatever it takes. Because the alternative is ending up like me. Wealthy, powerful, and eating lunch alone with a son who barely knows me. The honesty cracked something open in Marcus's chest. He reached across the table, covered his father's hand with his own. I know you, Dad. Maybe not as well as I should, but I know you. William's eyes went bright, emotion breaking through decades of control. Then learn from my failures. Be braver than I was. Fight for her. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Emma's school, the townhouse Marcus was buying, William's retirement plans that would never actually result in retirement. But the earlier confession lingered, a gift Marcus hadn't known he needed. He left the club with something resembling a plan. Claire wouldn't see him. Fine. He'd make himself impossible to ignore. He started with the clinic, anonymously funding the purchase of the building through a shell corporation his lawyer set up. Claire would own the property outright. No landlord, no rent increases, stability she'd never had. Then new equipment, top of the line, delivered through a grant from a foundation that technically existed but was funded entirely by Marcus. New autoclave, surgical laser, digital X-ray machine, everything she needed. Maria called him after the second delivery. She knows it's you. I don't know what you're talking about. The grant foundation is called the Sarah Emma Reed Memorial Foundation. You're not subtle. Is she mad? She's terrified of what it means to accept this, of owing you, of letting you buy your way back in. I'm not buying anything. I'm funding the work she does because it matters, and she shouldn't have to do it with broken equipment and constant financial stress. Maria was quiet for a moment. You're making it really hard for her to stay mad at you. Good. But Claire remained distant, professional when Emma visited, cordial when their paths crossed at vaccination clinics or community events. Never warm, never personal. Always one step ahead of Marcus's attempts to engage. Emma started asking why Claire never came over anymore, why they couldn't all have dinner like before, why adults had to make everything so complicated. Marcus had no good answers, just the truth that he'd broken something precious and didn't know how to repair it. May brought Emma's 9th birthday and a party at their new Brooklyn townhouse. 20 children, chaos and cake, Emma happier than Marcus had seen her in years. She'd invited Claire, who'd declined politely, sending a present instead, a book about marine biology, and a note that made Emma cry in the good way. Marcus stood in his new backyard watching children play and felt the absence like a missing limb. This should have been their life. Emma, Claire, him. A family built on choice instead of obligation. Instead, he was alone in a crowd of 9-year-olds, paying for his mistakes in the currency of loneliness. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. This is Claire. Can we talk? Not now, later, when you're free. Marcus's heart attempted to exit his chest via his throat. Anytime, anywhere, name it. Thursday, 7 p.m., Central Park, by the pond. The location choice wasn't accidental. Where they'd met. Where everything had started. Marcus spent the intervening 4 days oscillating between hope and terror, rehearsing what to say, how to be, what version of himself might convince Claire that he'd changed. Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth, spring finally committing to summer. Marcus arrived at the pond 30 minutes early, watched the water ripple in the breeze, remembered jumping in fully dressed to save a drowning woman and a drowning dog. How simple it had been to act then. How impossible it felt now to find the same courage. Claire appeared exactly at 7, dressed in jeans and a clinic t-shirt, hair pulled back, no makeup. She was beautiful in the way that mattered, competence and conviction visible in every movement. They walked the perimeter of the pond in silence, falling into step naturally despite months of separation. Finally, Claire spoke. "I've been seeing a therapist since February, trying to work through why your lying hit me so hard. And my dad's betrayal taught me that people leave, that stability is an illusion, that trusting someone gives them the power to destroy you. So I built walls, never let anyone close enough to hurt me, poured everything into work where outcomes were predictable and effort mattered more than luck." She paused at the exact spot where the dog had gone through the ice. "Then you showed up, jumped in without hesitating, kept showing up at the clinic, showed Emma what present fatherhood looked like. You cracked my walls without even trying, and that terrified me. So when I found out you'd been lying, it confirmed every fear I'd ever had. That trusting someone was stupid, that letting people in guaranteed pain." Marcus stayed quiet, knowing this wasn't his moment to speak. "But my therapist asked me something I couldn't answer. She asked if I was mad because you lied, or mad because the lying gave me permission to run away before I got too attached, before I had to risk actually building something real." Claire turned to face him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I think it was both. You absolutely betrayed my trust, but I also used that betrayal as an excuse to protect myself from the scariest thing I've ever faced. Loving you. Loving Emma. Building a life that mattered more than my clinic." "What changed?" "Emma's birthday present. I spent an hour picking out that book, writing that note, imagining her reading it. And I realized I'm already attached. Already in love with both of you. Staying away doesn't protect me, it just makes me miserable." Marcus's breath caught, hope flooding through his chest like light through a cracked door. "I'm so sorry I lied to you. I was scared of losing you, and I guaranteed it through cowardice. I know sorry doesn't fix that, but I'm done being the man who chooses fear. I quit the company. I sold the penthouse. I'm learning to be just Marcus, not Marcus Reed. And I'm hoping that's enough." "It's not about enough. It's about whether I can trust you. Whether you'll make the hard choice to be honest, even when it costs you something you want." "Test me. However you need to. I'll prove it." Claire reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I got a job offer. Director position at a veterinary hospital in Boston. Double my current salary, real benefits, actual stability. I'd have to move, leave the clinic, leave New York, leave you and Emma." Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. This was the test. The moment where he could prove he'd changed or reveal himself as still fundamentally selfish. Every instinct screamed to argue, to point out that they could make long-distance work, that money didn't matter if she was miserable, that Emma needed her, that he needed her. Instead, he forced himself to ask the only question that mattered. What do you want? Not what makes sense financially or what protects you from risk. What does your heart want? Claire's tears spilled over. I want to stay. I want this. You and Emma and the life we could build. But I'm terrified that wanting it makes me stupid. That I'm setting myself up for the same disappointment my mom had. Loving someone who'll always choose work over her. I chose you. I quit everything that made me Marcus Reed CEO, because being your partner mattered more than being successful. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, but I can promise I'll never lie to you again. I can promise you'll always know exactly where you stand with me. Even if where I stand is angry or hurt or needing space, especially then. They stood facing each other beside the pond where ice had broken under Claire's weight and Marcus had followed without hesitation. The parallel was obvious. Sometimes love meant jumping into freezing water. Sometimes it meant letting go of everything safe to catch someone falling. Claire closed the distance between them, hands finding his face, thumbs wiping away tears he hadn't realized he was crying. I'm turning down Boston. Not because of you, because my heart is here. The clinic, the community, the life I've built. You're part of that. Important part. But not the only part. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to know I'm not giving up my career for you. I'm choosing my life, which includes my work and my independence and my ability to tell you no when I need to. I don't want you to give up anything. I want to support the life you're building. Be your partner in it, not your savior or your project or your redemption. Claire kissed him then, soft and certain, a yes to questions neither of them had fully articulated. Marcus kissed back, careful and grateful, aware of how close he'd come to losing this forever. They pulled apart, breathing hard. Claire rested her forehead against his chest. This is terrifying. I know. I'm going to mess this up. Get scared and push you away. Then I'll give you space and wait for you to come back. What if I need you to fight for me instead? Then tell me. Use words. Be honest about what you need even when it's hard. That's how this works. Claire pulled back to study his face. You've changed. Actually changed. Not just performing change. I had to. The alternative was losing everything that mattered while clinging to success that meant nothing. They walked back through the park hand in hand, talking about the future in tentative terms. Claire wanted to keep her apartment for now, maintain some independence even as they rebuilt their relationship. Marcus wanted Emma to be part of the conversation. No more adult decisions made without including the child who'd be affected. They agreed to therapy together, to learning how to communicate, to building something sustainable instead of explosive. At Claire's car, Marcus pulled her close one more time. I love you. I know I said it before, but I mean it differently now. Not the desperate love of someone afraid of being alone. The certain love of someone who knows what they're choosing and chooses it anyway. I love you too. Terrified and certain in equal measure. That's the only kind of love worth having. Claire drove away with a promise to have dinner with Marcus and Emma on Saturday, to start rebuilding what they'd broken. Marcus stood in the parking lot feeling lighter than he had in months, like he'd been holding his breath underwater and finally surfaced. His phone rang. Emma, calling from her friend's house where she was sleeping over. Did she forgive you? We're working on it. Does that mean she's coming to dinner Saturday? It does. Emma's squeal of joy could probably be heard from space. I knew it! I knew she still loved us. Wait, can I tell Sophia? She said you'd never get Claire back because adults are stupid about feelings. You can tell Sophia she was almost right. Love you, Daddy. Thank you for not giving up. Love you too, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving up on me. Saturday's dinner was tentative and sweet, Emma chattering non-stop to fill any awkward silences, Captain begging for scraps under the table.
Claire helped Marcus cook, actual cooking, not ordering in, and they worked together with the rusty but familiar rhythm of people learning each other again.
After Emma went to bed, Marcus and Claire sat on the back porch of his Brooklyn townhouse, watching fireflies drift through the yard. This is nice. Normal house, normal neighborhood. You're very far from the penthouse. That was never home. It was a monument to success I didn't enjoy. This is smaller and better. Emma seems happy here. She is. Real friends in the neighborhood. Bike to school. Actually knows our neighbors' names. Turns out kids don't need penthouses. They need presents. Claire leaned against him, comfortable in the warm May evening. What are you doing with your time now, besides Emma and stalking me with anonymous donations? Reading. Something I never made time for. Thinking about teaching. Maybe business ethics at Columbia. Helping other people avoid the mistakes I made. That's very full circle. What about you? Hospital in Boston would have been more money, less stress. Also less purpose. The clinic matters. Not because it's mine, but because it serves people who'd otherwise go without care. Money doesn't fix that math. Marcus kissed her temple, grateful for her certainty. The foundation will keep funding it. No strings, just stable support so you can focus on medicine instead of finances.
I'm still not comfortable with that.
Get comfortable. You're stuck with me now, which means you're stuck with my resources being used for things that matter.
Bossy.
Honest. There's a difference.
They sat in comfortable silence, the night wrapping around them like permission to rest. Marcus's phone buzzed with an email from Richard about quarterly projections. He deleted it without reading. That life was over. This life, smaller, quieter, infinitely more valuable, was the one he was choosing. Summer unfolded in slow increments of rebuilding. Claire maintained her apartment but spent most weekends at the townhouse. They attended couples therapy with a practical woman named Dr.
Morrison, who called them on their patterns and pushed them toward honest communication. Emma thrived with Claire back in her life, the three of them falling into routines that felt like family. Marcus started teaching at Columbia in the fall, adjunct professor of business ethics, sharing cautionary tales from his own career with students young enough to still believe success and happiness were the same thing. He was good at it, found satisfaction in shaping minds instead of markets. Claire expanded the clinic's services, hiring 2 more vets with the foundation's funding, turning pause and hope into a legitimate operation instead of a barely functional charity case. She worked hard, but no longer to the point of collapse, having learned that martyrdom wasn't the same as service. It was October, almost a year since they'd met, when Emma staged her intervention. She called a family meeting, which consisted of ordering Marcus and Claire to sit at the kitchen table while she stood at the head like a tiny CEO. I have an announcement. Marcus and Claire exchanged amused glances. We're listening. You should get married. Claire choked on her water. Marcus went very still. Emma, that's not really your decision. I know. But you love each other, and you live together, basically, and Claire has a toothbrush here which Sophia says is basically engaged. So you should make it official. Sophia sounds very informed about relationships for a 9-year-old. Her parents just got divorced, so she knows all about it. Anyway, that's my announcement. You can go back to being gross and holding hands now. Emma flounced out of the kitchen, leaving 2 adults staring at each other with varying degrees of panic and hope. She's not wrong, Marcus ventured. About the loving each other part.
No, but marriage is a big step.
We've only been back together 6 months. We've known each other a year. Been through more in that year than most couples experience in a decade. I'm not saying we should get married tomorrow. I'm saying I want to. Someday, when you're ready. Claire was quiet for a long moment, processing. Ask me in a year. If we've made it through a full year of actual, honest relationship without major catastrophe, ask me then. Deal. And it better be a good proposal. None of this kitchen table discussion nonsense. Romance it up. Marcus pulled her into his lap, kissed her thoroughly. I can do romance. We'll see. But Marcus was already planning, already imagining the moment a year from now when he'd get on one knee at the pond where this all started and ask her to build something permanent from the temporary miracle of their meeting. The year passed in the strange way time does when you're actually living instead of just surviving. Emma turned 10. Claire's clinic saved its 1,000th animal. Marcus's class at Columbia got written up in the university magazine for its innovative approach to teaching business ethics through personal failure. The prosecution of a major pharmaceutical company for price gouging used case studies Marcus developed. Students thanked him for changing their perspective on what success meant. He won teaching awards he valued more than any business accolades he had accumulated. Claire and Marcus fought, the normal fights of people learning to share space and decisions and futures. He was too controlling sometimes, old CEO habits dying hard. She was too independent, forgetting that partnership meant letting someone help. They worked through it in Dr. Morrison's office and in late-night conversations and in the patient process of choosing each other daily. William Reed became a regular presence in their lives, showing up for Emma's school events, taking her to the Natural History Museum, trying in his awkward way to be the grandfather he'd failed to be when work mattered more than family. Marcus watched his father's transformation with the recognition of someone seeing his own journey reflected. October arrived again, leaves turning gold and crimson, air crisp with the promise of winter. Marcus had planned everything meticulously. Dinner reservation at the Greek diner where they'd had their first real conversation. Walk through Central Park at sunset. Pond where they'd met. Ring in his pocket. Simple emerald because Claire had once mentioned loving the color green, loving what it represented about growth and renewal. Emma was in on the plan, staying with Mrs. Martinez overnight, vibrating with excitement about the secret she'd kept for 3 weeks. Claire suspected nothing. She showed up at the townhouse in jeans and the Columbia sweatshirt Marcus had given her, hair down, beautiful in the way that made his chest ache with gratitude that she'd given him another chance. Dinner was perfect. They shared gyros and fries and laughed about Emma's latest scheme to convince them to adopt another dog. The waiter remembered them from a year ago, commented on how happy they looked, how different from that first awkward meal. Marcus tipped him extravagantly and felt no guilt about it. They walked through the park as the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink and purple. Claire talked about expanding the clinic further, maybe opening a second location in the Bronx where need was greatest. Marcus listened and offered thoughts and felt the ring box burning a hole in his pocket. The pond came into view, water reflecting the dying light. Marcus led Claire to the exact spot where he'd gone in after her, where ice had broken and everything had changed. Do you remember what you said to me? That first day in the diner? Claire tilted her head, thinking back. I said a lot of things, most of them judgmental. You said people who mistake being busy for being alive. You called me out before you even knew me. Saw straight through the performance to the emptiness underneath. I was harsh. You were right. I was so busy building an empire I forgot to build a life. Then you showed up, covered in pond water, and demanded I be better. And I fell in love with that. With you. With the person you saw I could be. Marcus knelt in the grass, pulled out the ring box, watched Claire's eyes go wide. I'm not that person yet. I'm still learning how to be honest when it's hard. How to ask for help instead of controlling everything. How to be worthy of you and Emma. But I want to spend the rest of my life trying. Will you marry me? Claire's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming.
You weren't supposed to ask until I said you could.
It's been a year. You said a year. I said a good proposal. This is an amazing proposal. You're not playing fair. Is that a yes? She dropped to her knees in front of him, took his face in her hands. Yes, obviously, yes. I love you, you manipulative romantic. Yes, I'll marry you. Marcus slid the ring onto her finger, kissed her while the sun set behind them and the world narrowed to this moment, this person, this impossible second chance at building something real. They stayed by the pond until full dark, talking about the future in concrete terms now. Wedding in the spring, small and intimate, just people who mattered. Claire would move into the townhouse officially, give up the apartment she'd been clinging to as insurance against disaster. They'd start trying for a baby if that's what they both wanted, give Emma a sibling and Claire the family she'd never had. Marcus's phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Emma demanding updates. He sent a photo of Claire's hand wearing the ring. Emma's response was 50 heart emojis and a demand that they come home immediately so she could celebrate properly. They found Emma and Mrs. Martinez waiting at the townhouse with cake and sparkling cider and Captain wearing a bow tie. Emma launched herself at Claire with the force of someone who'd been waiting hours to express her joy.
You said yes! I knew you'd say yes! Can I be in the wedding? Can I help pick your dress? Can we get another dog now that you're staying forever?
Claire laughed through her tears, holding Emma close. Yes to the wedding. Yes to the dress. We'll discuss the dog. That's basically a yes in adult language. Mrs. Martinez hugged them both, openly crying, having watched Marcus transform from empty workaholic to present father to man capable of building a family based on choice instead of obligation.
Sarah would be proud, she whispered to Marcus, of the man you've become, the father you are.
She'd be so proud. Marcus's throat went tight. He'd carried guilt about Sarah for so long, convinced her death was divine punishment for his failings. But maybe Mrs. Martinez was right. Maybe Sarah would want him happy instead of haunted. Maybe love didn't mean staying frozen in grief, but allowing yourself to grow beyond it. That night, after Emma finally went to bed and Mrs. Martinez went home, Marcus and Claire sat on their back porch, watching stars emerge in the October sky. Are you scared? Terrified. You? Equally terrified, but also certain in a way I've never been certain about anything. Claire leaned against him, ring catching moonlight. Tell me about Sarah. Really tell me. I know you loved her. I know you lost her. But I don't know who she was. Marcus took a breath, prepared to share the story he'd kept locked away. She was an artist. Painter mostly. Abstract stuff I never understood but pretended to. She was funny and stubborn and completely impractical. Forgot to pay bills because she was working on a piece. Burned dinner because she was sketching. Drove me crazy, and I loved her for it. What happened? I happened. Got promoted to CEO when Emma was 2. Threw myself into the work. Sarah supported it at first, thought it was temporary, but I kept choosing the company. Missed anniversaries, birthdays,
the small moments that build a marriage. She started getting tired all the time. I thought it was stress from single parenting because I was never home. His voice cracked, but he pushed forward. By the time we caught the cancer, it was stage 4, metastasized to her liver, lungs, bones. Oncologist gave her 6 months. She got 8. I promised to be there, to finally put her first, but I was closing a merger when she went into hospice. I was on the West Coast when she died, talking to investors about market penetration, while my wife took her last breath without me. Claire squeezed his hand, silent witness to confession.
I told myself I was providing for Emma, securing her future. Really, I was running from the guilt of letting Sarah down, from the fear of feeling anything. Work was safe. Work had clear metrics. Grief was chaos. Emma said you cried for days after Sarah died. I cried, then I stopped, went back to work, became the man who conquered corporate America while failing at basic humanity, until a stubborn vet jumped into a frozen pond and reminded me what courage actually looked like. I'm not Sarah. I can't replace her. I don't want you to. She was my first love, mother of my daughter, part of my story I'll always carry. But you're my second chance, my choice to love differently, better, with the honesty I couldn't give her because I was too scared to be vulnerable. Claire kissed him, soft and understanding. Thank you for telling me, for letting me know all of you, not just the parts you think I want to see. That's the deal now. Complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. No more omissions. No more protecting you from truths I think you can't handle. I'm going to hold you to that. Please do. They went to bed in the house that was finally a home, engaged and terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Marcus lay awake long after Claire fell asleep, listening to her breathing, feeling the weight of the ring on her finger, understanding that he'd been given a gift most people never got, the chance to do it right the second time. In the morning, Emma woke them at dawn, demanding to know every detail of the proposal. They made pancakes together, the 3 of them, while Captain supervised from his bed in the corner. Claire burned the first batch. Emma ate them anyway, declaring them perfect because they were made with love, which was the most important ingredient according to every movie ever. Marcus watched his daughter and his fiancée laugh over breakfast and felt the last piece of his broken heart click back into place. This was it. This was the life Sarah had begged him to build. Present, engaged, actually living instead of performing. His phone rang. William Reed, calling before 8 on a Sunday, which meant either emergency or sentiment. Marcus answered, stepping into the other room. Dad, everything okay? Fine. Just wanted to say congratulations. Mrs. Martinez told me the news. Thanks. We're happy. Terrified, but happy. That's how it should be. Son, I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. Marcus waited, knowing his father's confessions came rarely and mattered enormously. I'm proud of you. Not for building the company or making money or any of that nonsense. I'm proud that you had the courage to walk away, to choose your daughter and your happiness over success. That's the hardest thing a man can do. Admit that what he built isn't worth what he sacrificed to build it. Dad, let me finish. I failed at that. Built an empire and lost my family in the process. Your mother and I stayed married but stopped being partners. You grew up watching me choose work over presence. I thought I was teaching you success. Really, I was teaching you how to be lonely. William's voice went rough with emotion. But you learned the lesson I couldn't teach. You figured out that loving people is harder and more important than impressing them. I'm proud of that. Proud of who you've become. Marcus's eyes burned. Thank you. That means more than you know. Enjoy your life, son. Marry that woman. Be the father and husband you want to be. And if you need any help with wedding planning, your mother is already making lists. They hung up. Marcus stood in the quiet morning feeling lighter than he had in memory. His father's approval, long sought and rarely given, finally arrived not for achievement, but for choosing humanity over empire. He returned to the kitchen where Emma and Claire were engaged in serious discussion about wedding colors. Claire looked up, saw something in his expression, crossed to him. You okay? My dad said he's proud of me. Understanding flooded Claire's features. He should be. You're building something beautiful here. We're building it, together. Emma appeared between them, worming her way into the hug. Can we please focus on important things like whether to have chocolate or vanilla cake at the wedding? Both, Marcus and Claire answered simultaneously, then laughed at the synchronicity. See? Emma declared triumphantly. You're already thinking like married people. This is going to be perfect. She was right. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense, but perfect in the way of real life. Messy and honest and built on daily choice to keep showing up even when it was hard. They'd stumbled their way here through mistakes and grace, through broken trust rebuilt and second chances earned. Marcus looked at his daughter and his fiancée and felt gratitude so fierce it was almost painful. A year ago he'd been drowning, going through motions, calling survival success. Now he was living. Actually, genuinely living in a way that honored Sarah's memory and Emma's needs and the stubborn vet who'd demanded he be better. The doorbell rang. Maria at the door, having come to celebrate the engagement with homemade tamales and maternal approval. She hugged Claire fiercely, examined the ring, declared Marcus had done good for someone who'd spent months being an idiot. More people arrived throughout the day. Friends from the clinic, parents from Emma's school, Richard and his wife, proving business relationships could transcend professional boundaries. Dr. Morrison, their therapist, bringing wine and the knowing smile of someone who'd watched them fight their way to this moment. The townhouse filled with laughter and food and the specific joy of community celebrating love that had survived its own worst obstacles. Marcus moved through it feeling present in every moment, not planning the next thing or reviewing the last thing, but just existing here and now with people who mattered. As evening approached and guests started leaving, Emma pulled Marcus aside. Daddy, are you happy? Like, really happy? He knelt to her level, took her hands. Happier than I've ever been, sweetheart. Because I have you and Claire and a life that matters more than any company I could build. Good. Because you deserve it. You worked really hard to become a better person. So did you. You kept pushing me to choose what mattered instead of what was easy. That's my job, being your daughter and making sure you don't mess up too badly. Marcus laughed, pulled her into a hug. You're doing an excellent job. That night, after everyone left and Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Marcus and Claire sat in the living room surrounded by the debris of celebration. Claire's head rested on his shoulder, her breathing slow and even. Thank you, she murmured. For what? For not giving up. For fighting for this. For becoming someone I could trust after you broke that trust. That's real courage, not the jumping in ponds kind, the staying and doing the work kind. You're worth the work. This is worth the work.
They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from knowing someone deeply and being known in return. Captain snored from his bed. Upstairs, Emma's nightlight glowed under a door. Outside, Brooklyn settled into its evening rhythms. Marcus thought about the man he'd been a year ago.
Successful and miserable, wealthy and empty, so busy building an empire he'd forgotten to build a life. That man would be unrecognizable to him now. That man had been afraid of everything that made this moment possible. Claire stirred, looked up at him with eyes that saw all of him, and chose him anyway. Ready for bed? Ready for the rest of my life. She smiled, took his hand, led him upstairs to their bedroom in their house, in their neighborhood, where their daughter slept and their dog snored, and their future waited to be built, one honest day at a time. And Marcus followed, no longer running from grief or toward success, just walking, hand in hand with the woman who'd saved him by demanding he save himself, toward a tomorrow that was smaller and better and infinitely more valuable than any empire he'd ever built.